I see very much, I would say, first steps where you, first and foremost, you must create a willingness among producers and purchasers to engage. You have to show them the value of what the food cost means in terms of raising awareness of the food, local food in Donegal communities. Very, very, very important that you make your whole local foods more high-vis. And then, in turn, that the ultimate aim is that you have a product that you can take nationally and internationally in terms of the relationship between producers and purchasers in Donegal, and how this community community celebrates its own food, particularly on. Very important that it's an economic platform, very important that it's an ethical platform. You then have something, you have a wonderful food tourism product, but you also have something for the many visitors that come to Donegal, and you also have, you're trying to provide an opportunity whereby you play the hand of cards that you're dealt, that you take the very good core ingredient of Donegal and you build a cuisine upon that. Now, you might have to go back and you might have to visit the roots of Donegal in terms of, you might have to go back to core elements of food that was particular to Donegal, and you might have to work a little bit on that, be it varieties of potatoes or something like that. And you might have to work a bit, because you're going to have to say, well, this is a uniqueness to us in our area, Donegal, and this is what we want to do. I think what I would probably do first is somebody needs to do a quick audit of the strengths of the food in Donegal, the core food. The next thing is you want to look at an audit of who the producers are and what their capability is. And the third thing is who the potential producers are, because it's no good if you don't create an environment whereby people that might be unemployed, people that might have dropping incomes on farms, or people that have a premises that they might be willing to use, that they identify that there is a market there is a willingness out there from people to purchase their product, and that they in turn might just see themselves as a food producer. You need to come along then after that, and you need to work with the people who are already in the restaurant and hospitality sector in Donegal, and you might ask them, are they willing on a number of levels to engage with this process? Economics being very, very much important, but there has been greater economics. You have to identify that there will be greater economics if they do choose to engage, and that's desperately important. You tell them that it's probably a 3-year project, and that there's a little degree of flexibility and sponsorship required and goodwill from them, and that they would give a purchasing commitment. You're asking them effectively to look at the purchasing power of the business they're in, no matter what business it is, and to ring fence a defined portion of that to engage with the Donegal food network. That's very, 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 very important. You possibly need to organise a couple of events where you take a lot of people in Donegal that have potential to grow food in tunnels, to produce food, have the skill to make food in a very small basis, and bring them into a forum where they will meet people who have the potential to buy from them. Now, you have to look at the barriers to entry there in terms of the greatest fear that these small producers have in terms of compliance with contemporary regulation, barriers to entry in terms of what's required to bring their food up to a spec where it's sold. You have to demystify all of that for them. You have to go onto the Food Safety Authority website, and you have to download the protocols for the production of food in a domestic environment. You have to look at the protocols used by the country market movement, and you have to educate people as to the possibilities of making food for sale in a domestic environment. Then it's very, very important with all of this process that you identify strategic partners in the rollout of your platform. And the strategic partners will definitely be people from big hotels like Rathmullen House. The strategic partners could be coffee shops, the strategic partners could be filling stations with a high profile, and that you come along the road and that you give a sticker, something that will identify wherever the product is used, wherever the partnership is actually engaging, and wherever the point of sale is where the customer is buying, whether they're buying an apple juice, a jam with their scone, whether they're buying the scone itself, that there'll be something to identify that they are engaging with this process and that they're doing their own. It can be a very, 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 very simple logo, not unlike the sticker that we use in Good Food Ireland, and that's very important. I would see that you could build up, there's no mistake about it, you build up a website, you build up Facebook, you build up Twitter contents, and you build up an active community who engage with each other, and where people like me, who'd be a passive observer on the outside, could watch that engagement. I could watch the engagement of the story of the growing, I could watch the engagement in terms of the lifestyle of the people, I could watch how interesting the year is developing in terms of what's available, and it would be almost like as if I was reading a weekly blog or a newspaper article on what's happening in food. And I think to do something like that would help very much to generate the awareness in the greater community about what is happening on the platform, that the public could start to say, I like what's happening here, I want to engage, and maybe I want to ring fence 1, 2, 5, 7% of my own purchasing to engage with the Donegal Food Network. I see that as being very, very important. I also see that there is a need for a very well managed, well orchestrated, low cost public campaign in terms of advertising, in terms of media launches, in terms of using the network of Food and Wine magazine, things like that, just to get the word out that Donegal, that exciting things are happening in Donegal. Probably there's time for spring events in the Food Network, and there are time for autumn events in the Food Network. Not necessarily time for summer events, because your producer and your purchaser is very busy. Spring events, it's very exciting in the garden. Who's growing for who? Who's going to supply who? Who's writing fashionable menus based on the availability of seasonal produce? And then when you come to the autumn and the courgettes come in and the tomatoes come in and all those things, when it comes to the 1st of August, you have this whole thing again. Okay, it's in the restaurants, we're starting to use it, we're having 8 weeks of local tomatoes in Donegal, we're having the new potatoes, the first of the new potatoes are in Donegal, the following varieties are in, and everything from the animation of who's best, who is the best product, who has the best menu, who reflects it the best, and the public begin to get carried away somewhat in the little bit of animation that's taking place, in the theatre that's taking place in the food community. I know in my own business that we have 200 people in the last 2 months watching us on Facebook. We get a lot of very interesting comments. I have a number of journalists who leave comments on it. I put up pictures of my garden. I get a TV program out of my garden, and you know, my garden is absolutely tiny, but it's the way you project the images, the way you tell the story is all important. There is a media out there, from the Irish Times to Food and Wine magazine, and they're only dying for lifestyle stories, successful ones, based around food. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity for a platform that said Donegal is responding within its community, Donegal is pioneering self-help, Donegal is looking at future employment in its agri-food sector. Donegal has a strategy to deal with the agri-downturn that's post-2013 when the subsidies begin. And Donegal are trying to encourage the graduates from Killybeg School and their own graduates to look again at the potential of creating employment, living back in rural communities and having a rural lifestyle, maybe attracting some people back from abroad who have fallen into the restaurant or food business by default, because the reason I say something like that is that many people who do law, marketing, actuary, finance, everything like that, and they go to New York or San Francisco and they spend a summer working in a bakery, and they're the absolute perfect people to come back and set up an artisan food business in their early 30s, because they're just so excited about food and they have such management skills that they've accumulated through education and through their experiences abroad, working even part-time, working in funky food environments in America, New Zealand and Sydney. And those are the sort of people that we need to attract back into the rural communities, to bring that cutting-edge experience from places like Sydney, like New York, like Thailand, all those places, to bring that experience back here into Donegal and to bring the graduate brain back with an interest in food and say, look, you're the next generation. Can you use some of the wonderful local ingredients that we actually have in this area, and can you take it, can you make it in a product, can you engage, and can you create some sustainable economics for the future in the rural communities and the urban communities of Donegal?